Welcome to the MIT IT Innovation Program podcast. This is a repository of insights by thought leaders and practitioners of innovation where they speak about their views, insights, and experiences. Come join us.
So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Innovations in the Gaming Ecosystem, Fueling Industry Growth. I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker and innovator, Mr. Kapil Rathee, President of Junglee Games. At Junglee, Kapil spearheads the business strategy, product strategy, business intelligence, and revenue growth optimization from the current products while creating new product lines. He strongly believes innovation, automation, data science, business intelligence, and effective business processes are pillars of any high-growth businesses such as Junglee Games. Prior to Junglee, he founded a FoodTech startup, Tap&Eat, to provide operation efficiency and customer delight. Previously, he has held roles of strategy and business consultant roles to cater to business needs of Fortune 500 companies globally. He is passionate about providing strategic data-driven solutions to complex business problems for growth and sustainability. Focused to help and build businesses by leading teams with collaboration, customer focus, and organizational culture focus. So before we proceed to listen to Kapil, I have a few updates to share about the session and the MIT ID Innovation Program webinar platform. For those who are joining us for the first time today, I'd like to inform you that MIT stands for the 4-decade-old Maharashtra Institute of Technology. ID stands for MIT's 15-year-old Pioneering Institute of Design. MIT ID's one-year innovation program focuses on the 4 pillars of design, business, technology, and humanities. The key features and differentiators of this one-year course are immersions, project-based learning, and humanities. So on behalf of Professor Harshit Desai, head of the innovation program and the core team, we are grateful to be amongst you all hosting the session today. Today's webinar will have our guest speaker share his insights for the first half hour, followed by questions facilitated by me in the latter half hour. Please do read the chat for other important pointers that will be shared shortly. This is our 26th industry interaction this season, and I, Priya Dhawan, Head of Collaborations, Branding and Outreach for the MIT ID Innovation Program, welcome you all once again to this thoughtfully curated innovation journey. Warm welcome once again, Kapil. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And majorly, I would be talking about what sort of different innovations are happening as we speak in an Indian ecosystem in gaming specifically, but in general also what are the supplement or peripheral ecosystems which has actually helped gaming actually fuel the industry growth overall. And to start with, I'll just talk about a little bit of story across the globe, how the gaming industry growth looks like. And if you'll notice, like, lately there is a lot of buzz around gaming, and rightly so, because if you look at the engagement and if you look at the growth rate of gaming, that is unparalleled to any other industry. And lately you might have heard from some of the key folks, CEO of Netflix, that they are not threatened by their competitors, but they're more threatened by gaming because it is sort of a parallel to entertainment, right? So we are not sort of in a need-based kind of a business, but it is more like, how do we leverage people's free time or their passion to engage them into fantastic games and give them that experience, what they're looking for when they have some time at their hand. So we are sort of in competition with the entertainment industry. The big difference, however, in gaming versus a pure play OTT platforms or entertainment platform is like gaming is an active form of entertainment. So generally, when you consume videos, when you consume movies, or when you listen to music, it's mostly passive. Gaming, however, gives you that active interactions within the game, and that can change the outcome of a game. So that brings the thrill and little excitement as compared to any other sort of entertainment. Now, interestingly, if you look at worldwide, the gaming industry is bigger than Hollywood industry, yet it does not until lately it has not been getting the due attention, especially in the ecosystem. Like gaming has always been there, probably on forefront of most of the innovation. During this discussion we'll go through a few of those, and probably you guys should be able to relate that how gaming has been driving innovation behind the scene, and which is being adopted, and gaming industry itself is also adapting to a lot of innovations that might be happening around us, from technology to changing dynamics into the socioeconomics, and changing user consumer behavior as well. So currently, if you would want to divide gaming markets, you can pretty much try and say, hey, there's a mobile gaming, then there is a tablet gaming, there's a PC games, there are download based games, and there is something you can play on cloud and console based games, right? So the growth story has been largely of mobile gaming. So the share which you see right now, which is pretty much around 50% of overall industry, is driven by mobile gaming. So now gaming has quickly adapted to the rise of the mobile ecosystem. Now it's purely not gaming itself driving the growth, but a lot of innovation has happened in the mobile ecosystem itself, which actually supplemented the growth of a gaming industry. However, traditionally, we have always been playing games, right? Earlier, we used to play games on a small video game console, and then from there on, we started moving to PC games, and we still do. We still play those, and then there are Xbox and Nintendos of the world where we started moving on. Eventually, now pretty much you have the power in your hand with mobiles, and more game publishers building games for mobile, and more mobile uh, phones actually supporting those games. And it takes a lot much of effort in terms of tech in order to actually host such games, which generally needs a high graphics and high consumptions on CPUs and so on and so forth. So we'll talk a little bit on the complexity as well as we go along. But this should give you a picture like where we are headed. So console still tends to be the number two, where obviously most of I should say hardcore gamers, unlike a casual gamer who are very passionate about gaming, they will still stick around to console, while a lot of casual gamers would start moving to mobile, where they will play for 30 minutes break or 5 minutes break. However, a console gamer would tend to play 1 to 2 hours almost every day. So that still has a lot of share in overall revenue systems. And if you will look at the growth of global industry, we have been increasing steadily year on year, and very soon it would be $200 billion industry. Moving on, looking at the outlook of how it looks like right now. So obviously the whole world saw COVID transformation, and I will try and talk more through the growth of mobile only games, which is recently App.Annie released their last quarter report, and this is how it looks like. And interestingly, you can also look at the whole stats in a way where you can compare a gaming ecosystem versus a non-gaming ecosystem. And this is just talking about iOS and Google Play. So interestingly, we'll notice most of the downloads are coming from Google Play, but the revenues are being driven by iOS. And that's purely because most of the revenue in the gaming right now, from a monetization standpoint of view, is driven still by North America and Europe, while Southeast Asia and India specifically have the user base, but we are yet struggling to monetize as much as we would want to. And that's where you see the user base there, thanks to India and China, also the population, but not necessarily the monetization is also at the same scale. However, this is only talking about iOS and Google Play. Now, pretty much a new innovation which has been adapted by a lot of OEMs, from Xiaomi to Vivo to Oppo to Samsung, is building their own ecosystem around stores, where they are creating, and lately Jio is a latest entry to the ecosystem, where they're creating their own stores. Even within those stores, the most of the traction is built by gaming. So you will find that within your phones, like there will be a pre-burned apps in those stores, and you will find most of those would still be heavily skewed towards gaming. Now, post-COVID, obviously the numbers look little better. People have more time at hand, and they would want to connect socially as well with their family and friends. And one of the big way they are able to connect virtually, besides doing video calls and watching something on OTT, is playing games together. So that has become one of the uh, key picks in terms of what they can do in terms of leveraging their time for de-stressing or entertainment. And this shows that within a quarter there is a 20% year on year growth, which is what you can see, uh, and which is huge. Like generally when you have a quarterly growth of 7 to 8%, now when you see a 20, which is huge. From an Indian ecosystem point of view, multiplayer games has seen at least a 35% increase in uh, user play. Session times have increased from generally 30 minutes to uh, 45 minutes during COVID, and that's purely because of COVID. Let me speak little on what are the how India is placed in overall global ecosystem. So India still is among the top five markets when it comes to user base. However, we might be standing on a 50 plus when it comes to the monetization. But that's what brings power to India, that we have the user base and we have people who who are interested to play these games. And some of the key drivers we will talk about soon as well are also generally led by some of the supplement growths which we have seen in the industry. But just purely looking at this phenomena, like hardly people knew about gaming before, I would say 2015. I mean, of course, there were very few studios. If you look at 2015 or even 2017, you would have about only 25 studios, gaming studios. Today, we have about almost 300 gaming studios across India. That's within a span of 3 years. Uh, the growth rates have been phenomenal, and you would see that growth has started picking up from 2018, and the growth rates are up and up from 1920, and we're forecasting that this growth will continue to grow even further. Now, what are the key drivers for this growth as far as Indian ecosystem is concerned? Few of them um, obvious ones are basically, hey, now we have the population. We also have a younger population, which is less than 25 and less than 35 users, which are who are more open to play games, and that brings in the power of users, the just purely the count of users. And then second most important transition which we have seen, especially from 14 to 16, is purely the adoption of smartphones. Earlier, it was pretty much, I won't say impossible. There were still some handsets which were only meant for gaming, but pretty much difficult to afford a gaming headset where you can, which are equipped enough to play games. But today, pretty much almost every handset which OEMs are releasing, they are equipped enough that you can play a game seamlessly. And the traction of handsets as we speak would be around 500 million smartphones. And soon enough, by 23, we are expecting that number to be around 900 million, probably even close to a billion, just purely based on what we saw last quarter. So that might have fueled some more growth there. Uh, Other key factors are the amount of disposable income. So lately, overall economy has also seen some boost, and more importantly, there is while we were little hesitant into open up ourselves to making digital payments, now we have also had enough innovation into the payment ecosystem where micro payments are enabled, and people are more and more comfortable, and they trust these payment ecosystem changes, that and they're so used to it. That's a adoption generally a consumer behavior adoption which has happened. So people are open to spend that kind of money on gaming as well. Now, typically when you go to a movie, you will spend about a 500 or 600 bucks to watch a movie, and you can figure out a long-term engagement or long-term entertainment just by spending a similar amount of money, but probably playing for a month or maybe more. So that's where gaming actually fits in, and it also helped overall. Earlier we were a little closed to adopting to digital payment system as compared to the global standards. The second thing came is the third thing that came is the geo boost. Thanks to geo, I think they brought in a huge change when it comes to the data consumption and the spends we need to uh, do in order to consume data cheaply. So now, one, of course, there is a better 3G and 4Gs of the world where we are more connected than ever, and internet is more stable than ever. So it was very hard to play games on a 2G, and it is still is. Like, if anybody might have tried those games, it's hard. It takes a long time to load those games, and then performance on real time games become pretty bad. So the adoption of internet and cheapness of the data brought in by geo was one of the another huge factor which drove growth for the ecosystem overall. Uh, Now, what works really for Indian gaming ecosystem is the content needs to be a little localized. So the latest example is Ludo. Uh, I'm sure like you guys must have seen that the amount of Ludo games since we have seen from 2016 till today, you'll find 100 plus games just built for Ludo. And that's largely because of the success of Ludo King, but also purely, think about our childhood, and you would have might have played a board game um, on a board with your family, but now it's hard one to always find that sort of time, but you can still connect virtually and play that game on mobile. So it is something which was built in our culture always, but it was not finding its way to online gaming. Now it has. Uh, on lines of those other games like Carom or other games like Teen Patti, Rummy, these games have seen a lot of traction purely because of the product market fit. So you have the consumer base already. It's just that you need to supply them with the right kind of game and experience in the game, and they will quickly adopt to it. Also, when you talk about international games like PUBG and adoption of those games to India, what has been a critical factor is how these games have managed to localize for India. Like PUBG, generally, whenever they do esports or sort of a promotion, they will align those with Holi, Diwali, and they will also try and align those with regional languages. So Indian gamers or Indian overall user base is little hungry for content customized for Indian consumer base, and that has really worked well uh, for the industry overall. And I think industry has also pretty much quickly adapted to the changing user behavior effectively. So these are some of the critical factors which has boosted the industry. While rest of the world might see about a 19% CAGR, Indian ecosystem overall on mobile will be seeing a 35% growth. Uh, within Indian ecosystem, I think the user growth is there. It's the monetization. I think adoption on the free to play game is yet to be strong, but we are predicting that by 2023 we'll see a even stronger growth purely on even free to play games and purely in-app purchases. So moving on, what are the different business models? Generally, from an outside perspective, let's say, I'm sure like there might be few students here and few of corporates who might would want to understand gaming a little bit more, and few business owners who might would want to think about how uh, gaming businesses are looking like and what kind of different monetization models are there. So if you look at internationally, most of the successful games have in-app purchases. So in-app purchases is a great monetization tool if there is a lot of stickiness in the game. So which means that in order to move to a next level, or in order to compete with your friends, or in order to continue the game from one level to another, you might be pushed to do an in-app purchase, which is, at the end of the day, you only get uh, some sort of currency. That's what we call it. It's a game currency. It could be a secondary currency, or it could be a tertiary currency, depending on the game. Within the game, which allows you to play more, or you get some powers, extra powers over purely free users, and which gives you a competitive advantage in the game. So that has been the traditionally the key model, along with in-app advertisements. So this is what works well for India as far as freemium games are concerned, which is purely because we have the user base, and a lot of brands have understood the power of this user base, and the kind of engagement which gaming brings is unparalleled to any other industry. So if you look at e-commerce, generally you will find, hey, on average, month-on-month sessions would be 2 to 3. If you look at food tech, that might be 4 to 5. Um, in payments, it's pretty much close, but the session time is generally like a minute or two. You do your transaction, you move out. But when you talk about gaming, the session times are, you're talking about 30 minutes to 45 minutes on average. And on top of that, it's not that you're looking at a month on month session. It's basically looking at day by day. So the kind of engagement which you see in a game is very high, and that has been understood by also a lot of brands, and they are leveraging these opportunities to acquire more and more users, and build strategic relationships, as well as the kind of ecosystem Google Play or App Store or other stores give you to purely use this has been fantastic. So that will continue to happen as of now, especially in the free to play games. These have been typically the traditional modules, and then comes the premium kind of games, which is basically you pay once and you continue to play on that game. So typically, we have seen that, when you play a console game, you buy a game and you start playing on that. Now the same concept also moved to mobile, where you can go to an app, you buy it for $1 or $5, and it's there with you. Typically, these games are very story-rich games, and they're deep games and meant for people who generally try to get engrossed in a game, in a story of the game, and continue to evolve in the game and build their skill around that game. And the content lasts somewhere around um, 60 days to 90 days, and depending on the levels, how many you have created. But these games is generally, you buy a front and call it a day. So it purely depends on how many downloads you can get, and also meant for pretty much how hardcore gamers who know that they would want to get into that game and evolve in that game. And it needs a very strong branding when it comes to monetizing these games, especially as far as India is concerned. Now, again, typically what you would see in a console world, there would be a lot of copy paste and so on and so forth for these games as well, which they in India would not allow that to monetize fairly. But with mobile coming in play, I think it's a fair game, which we have also seen there is a surge of purchase per load kind of games in India as well. The next one is basically an Incent based advertisement, where you get sort of you do some action in the game or watch a video, and you get something in the game which you are playing, which allows you to continue to play. So the type of advertisement are many, like it could be a banner, it could be a video, it could be an action within the game which you do, or it could be a daily bonus which you come every day and try and get those. So those also generally have been one of the key revenue drivers. And latest in the mix is the subscription. So now lately we have seen adoption of subscription as well outside Indian ecosystem, Indian gaming ecosystem. But now the good thing is gaming is also quickly adapting to it, where likes of Prime and Netflix has paved way for it, where they have sort of changed the user behavior already towards that, where people are okay paying month on month. for that, or paying annually. And even in the health and fitness sector now, we are seeing these subscription models even for apps and product online. So generally, that there is an openness in our overall ecosystem as well to actually adopt to it, and gaming has been leveraging this uh, as well as we speak. But yet we have not seen that kind of adoption per se, and it's probably also because not many gaming companies have yet tried this out. But this works fantastically for games which generally host tournaments, and tournaments entries could be part of that subscription package where they can generally win some prize money at the end of a tournament. So these are some of the powerful monetization models which have been going, and they're evolving, by the way. So from evolving, I move on to the biggest move or the next disruption which is going to happen into the gaming industry, or as we predict would be the esports. So this is something which has been hidden and started seeing some traction again from 2017, but started an Indian ecosystem. Few early adopters started uh, having some exposure to it from 2015. Now this is a complex ecosystem, purely on three grounds: how you monetize in a esports world, and there are various ways to do that. Second, how would you build different leagues, and how do you build traction of teams and kind of give them that virtual experience where they can play together. And few of us might have done that in our colleges, where we might have played in LANs with each other. Now we are these companies are trying to bring this either in on the ground as well as virtually. So building platforms which allow to plug in a lot of games which are generally multiplayer games and real-time multiplayer games, and there is an action which you can see live. So different kind of things came out of that. One, obviously it's a publisher heavy kind of model, uh, where the game studios which are building these, they are owning majority of the rights, and they are basically driving um, pretty much 25% of the revenue as far as overall ecosystem is concerned. Now, the secondary to that is the brand sponsorships, which is actually the biggest revenue driver as of now. Uh, so brands are leveraging, just like I talked about in mobile gaming, there is a free to play in-app advertisement. That's how brands are leveraging it to build more and more brand visibility as well as brand equity. Now brands are looking at esports in terms of bringing the same sort of brand equity and visibility. And a few of the companies have been leveraging it for a while, since 2010, like especially Red Bull and Microsoft. And that ecosystem on the brands as well as one is like, hardcore tech companies like Nvidia or Intel, or Samsung and Logitech, because there's a direct fit. Or there is a companies like Red Bull or Coke, which is an indirect fit, but they still find a lot of traction, because the way the ecosystem of esports is building, they're trying to build it parallel to sports. And there have been Asian games around it. I'm not sure if you guys are, how many here are aware that, one of our players won a bronze medal in Asiad this year. And this is not just in India and Asia, by the way. I think it has found that visibility and tradition across the world, including Middle East. So that's pretty powerful, which is happening as we speak. So that's another way to monetize. Then of course you do events, you host events where you bring players together, allow them to play together, and you generate money through those events and participation of different teams in those events. Then you can purely start managing leagues. Typically, generally what you will see in a cricket game, different IPL teams. So this is pretty much the same. You start managing leagues, building your own teams, and they start competing against different teams, and you fight for a prize money. So these are different models which involves everyone from secondary players to players who are building esports platform to actually host these games, to the publisher who are building the games which you can play on these esports platform, or the events which companies are doing, or the players who are participating in those. At the same time, the leagues, professional leagues, which you can start creating and generating revenue from that. So the options are huge. It's still not structured. It's still, as far as India is concerned, it will still need another 2 to 3 years, but that's the biggest bet as of now when it comes to driving the next sort of growth in terms of business revenue and overall ecosystem. There are challenges generally which we have seen are purely around, opening up platforms from game publishers, so that, as open source party can leverage some APIs to host these games and do tournaments within their friend circle, or within their community, or within their company, or within their leagues, and so on and so forth. But those challenges are being solved. More and more publishers are open to open those APIs, and as we speak, there is about almost like 70% of the top titles generally people play has already adapted to it. Another interesting angle to this is purely the traction of platforms like Twitch. Earlier, most of the streaming or gameplay generally would have been on YouTube and YouTube influencers. Now, all the gaming influencers have moved to Twitch, which means like these influencers are responsible for creating content or a live streaming experience where you will find more and more engagement from fan base, and from that fan base, brands are leveraging and or companies are leveraging it for ad revenues. So a lot of options, a lot of opportunity in that space, and still evolving, and still needs a little more structure. But definitely a lot of innovation is happening in that space. Now, moving on, how gaming has evolved, and where we are today and what's next. Now, gaming is nothing new to most of us. Games have been around for a while. In 70s, we used to go to a particular game kiosk or a game parlor where we used to play these games on a kiosk. Then these started becoming smaller. You could bring them home. Then they started becoming handheld devices where you can play those video games. I used to play Tetris when I was a kid, but I'm sure like you guys have your favorites. Then we moved into computer gaming, where either there were some pre-burn games from Microsoft, or you would get some games on a floppy drive, and you would play games like Contra or Mario. That's what we call the golden age of gaming, where people were fascinated, like, hey, what's happening? I can do. They were, especially in young generation, they were leveraging computer less to hone their skills on other areas, but enjoy more on the gaming side of things. Then we started seeing the power of internet, which allowed people to create games which could be played anywhere by just purely connecting to the internet. In last 1 decade, it has been purely driven by mobile and cloud gaming. And I'm sure, recent two announcements, both from Apple as well as Google, has been around Stadia and Arcade. They have not found a lot of success there, but I'm sure they simply launched. It will take about a year or two before the adoption starts happening on that front, and they will also tweak their products around and will make it more and more seamless, and that will allow players to compete in that cloud-based gaming space, and more and more real power to real-time players will happen. Now, again, from this is a consistent innovation which is happening from 2000 till now. Now augmented reality is nothing new. Like, even it has come down to education, where we are leveraging it to even teach kids. Like, you can pretty much project an image of an elephant, and you will see, hey, you can teach the students an elephant, and that can even make a sound. There are a lot of games around that. Personally, I've tried a few of those games, and one of the, we are all fan of cricket, so cricket has been one of those games where when you will use those equipment, you will feel like, hey, you are in a big stadium and you can actually play the shot you would want to, and that's the kind of experience you will see, combining both augmented reality as well as virtual reality. Gesture controls, Nintendo and every other Xbox and console games has been around for a while, where you can pretty much try and jump around, or you can box around, or if whatever the kind of games you like, you can pretty much do that purely leveraging the gesture control. Lately, not enough adoption, but there's also voice recognition that is happening. And most importantly, like earlier touched upon, is the quality of graphics in the game, or the designs in the game, and the high definition display on the mobile, or on our laptops, on our TVs, uh, has has been the next phase, where we are we are improving every pixel of a character, or every pixel of an action, or every pixel of a motion in a game, and or particle motion in the game. So a lot of innovation is happening on that space. And finally, we talked a little bit on the live streaming, which will obviously give a more boost to the esports, which has been prevalent. Now, when we talk about these product and technologies, there's a lot which is also happening, which equips people to build games quickly. What I mean by that is, now today you will find a lot of game engines which you can leverage, plug and play, build a game, roll it out, and see how it feels. And it can be done very quickly. Unity being one of them, Epic Game Engine being another. So there are now open source game engines as well, which are available, which you can try and leverage. Now, talking about a little on the technology, the complexity in building a game or operation of a game is little more as compared to some of the other products which you generally would see, purely based on the kind of information which you would want to start gathering together to understand a player user behavior, um, or the kind of animation you would want to build, or kind of game mechanics you would want to build, and everything has to be uh, pixel clear. And that takes a lot of CPU power, that takes a lot of IO ops, that that eats up a lot of server bandwidths. And that's where, when, and gaming also gives you an option to have a lot of concurrent users. Now, if you look at games like Ludo King, you will have a 20 million plus DAUs, which is huge. And how do you handle that kind of scale, where every day, at an every single point in time, you might have a million CCUs plus, which is unparalleled to any other industry. Of course, you know you have platforms like Netflix and OTTs, and they come the closest, but there is also an interaction involved at every single thing you do in a game, so that adds more complexity to it. So a lot of innovation is purely happening at the back end on what these different technologies are, and how they are being built, and how they are being built for scale, and how they are being built for scale and agility, where you can take a game quick to the market. So that has been one of the biggest thing which is happening behind the scene, but still does not see um, a lot of action when it um, comes to the visibility of what might be happening in the technology front. This has also opened, as specifically to India, opened up a lot of roles. Like every industry has some specific roles, just purely for some of the students who might be in this session today. Gaming has very specific roles in different areas. Um, Starting from game producer. Game producer is nothing but a sort of a program manager generally, which you will see, or a project manager you will see in an MNC, where he is the responsible for coordinating different people, trying to tell them what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. There is a specific role called game designer, which is generally people confuse that with a UX designer or a graphic designer. That designer is totally different, which is he's responsible for creating the game level, the theme, and what is the complexity of that level should be. Um, Game economist, which is who are responsible for creating secondary or tertiary or primary economy of a game, and pinpointedly figuring out what are the triggers in a game which will push people to buy something, and create that sawtooth pattern, that what is that sweet spot where they will block and push people to pay, uh, and uh, and also like how do they avoid any sort of churn, how do they bring people in. Then obviously there are product managers who are responsible for ensuring that there's enough retention in the game and there is enough engagement in the game. How do they increase the average session time? How do they increase the amount of games somebody is playing? How do they increase the number of sessions within the day? So on and so forth. Some of these might have an overlap with other industry as well, but these are very specific roles for gaming. You will also find uh, other roles like 3D artist, which is kind of little unique to gaming, and or particle game designers, where every animation needs to be fine tuned and so on and so forth. Or game artist, where they will be responsible creating the theme or the characters. So a lot of diversity when it comes to talent and creativity, uh, and sort of innovation that is happening behind the scene besides technology as well. Um, so I think that sums it up for me in terms of where we are in terms of gaming ecosystem overall, and what kind of innovations which we have been seeing across different areas, from technology, business, consumer mindset, or changing user behavior. I at the end, I do want to touch base on two more things, which is data science, AI, and neuroscience. So data science slash AI, that's one, and neuroscience. Now, this is something new to most industry. Like we have lately started seeing in the last 5 to 10 years, like, it started with the big data, and from there on it started changing to ML. From there it started changing to AI. Gaming has been pretty worse with AI from almost 1992, where earlier they were leveraging AI to just create computer participant to a game, right? When you must have played with a computer, right? How does it play? That's nothing but an AI. Now, of course, you keep on building final levels to it, keep on increasing difficulty to it. Lately, the real AI is how do you replicate a user behavior completely, and learn that user behavior, and eventually also train a computer to play with that user. Earlier, it was a sort of a uh, set algorithm which generally would play as you have defined the rules. But today you can also keep on learning that majority of my users are playing like this, and how you can train let me call this as a game bot, and you can train them, and they can actually give you that experience. They are still not as smart as we would like them to be, but I'm sure like few of you guys, if you have tried a game like PUBG, when you spawn initially, when there was not enough liquidity and you had to have a battleground of 100 people, in that, your first hits would be some dumb people who are trying to shoot, and they wouldn't know where they're shooting, and you would kill them immediately, and you won't find any resistance in that. So those are those are the game bots which you continue to train, and they eventually get to a point where you almost feel like, hey, I'm pretty much playing with a genuine player. So that has been around for a while. Data science and ML, the kind of use cases in gaming there are phenomenal. Purely understanding a user behavior, like in every industry we try to user behavior and user sentiments, but the interaction points which you have in the game, uh, you can pretty much observe a behavior of a player for a duration, and kind of predict if this person is going to win a game or not, or sort of also leverage these techniques to upskill different players in your game. And upskill is very important. Like, in gaming, one of the biggest thing is, especially in multiplayer games, how do you skill match people to the same level? If you are playing with a rock star and you match with them, they're going to win every time, and you are going to churn out very quickly because you don't see any way around that person to win. So there is something about winning, and also having a game on a level playing field. So that's where the skill matching comes into play, and that's where data science model starts coming in, where they can identify and start creating the skill scores for users. Then there is obviously sort of a fraud detection, collusion detection, in case those might be applicable for the games, where ideally it should not have happened, but there might be some players who might be doing it, and you continue to build towards that. Um, you can also sort of, from ethical standpoint of view, build some really good checks and balances, where you see somebody has been playing for long hours, and they should not be doing it. So how do you sort of bring that cool off period of self-exclusion time for them and tell them, hey, cool off, you have been playing very aggressively. So those are some of the practices which gaming systems or gaming companies are trying to adopt worldwide. Uh, so there are a lot of use cases when it comes to data science, and similarly neuroscience. Now, there have been a lot of studies that have especially being done in last 5 years, purely to understand how a game releases a dopamine um, in our brain, or how can you leverage a game to build a child brain, for that matter, right? What are the different games you can build specifically for kids education? So a lot of work is being put onto that, where pretty much you stitch around equipment on your head, and they try to assess your hand-eye coordination, as well as eye movement and retina detection, and kind of calibrate the brain waves which is sending. And that also allows game publishers to understand what a gamer might be thinking and what kind of dopamine release he might be going through at any single point in time. That's why there is a specific role, at least in a big gaming companies, which is purely neuroscientists, which generally just do that. So a lot of niche things are happening in the industry, and I see yet, we have seen a lot of tremendous growth in India, but as far as competing on the global standards, purely on the sort of titles that uh, might be released from India, is pretty much very few. And if, let's say, one of them is huge success in Ludo King, that's purely on the product market fit and the size of Indian economy and user base. So I think next step for from Indian ecosystem context standpoint of view, how do we bring more creativity? How do we bring specific different sort of roles, and people becoming more open to play those roles, from neuroscientists to data scientists to ML engineers to game designers to level designers, and they can contribute to build great games from Indian game studios, which can make a global impact as well. So I think that from an Indian ecosystem should be the next thing, and I'm pretty sure that at an industry level we always talk about it, and pretty much everyone wants to contribute towards that, and there have been a lot of support which we have been also getting from outside investors. In fact, a few of the companies like Tencent or Alibaba or Ubisoft, they've also started setting up their studios in India as well. So a lot of power will continue to uh, move through gaming as we speak, and at least for next 5 years. Pretty much in next 5 years, we should be seeing that, hey, this is where we are as compared to global standards. Right now, India is among the top 5 countries when it comes to uh, the user engagement, or purely number of users or revenues. But the kind of growth we are seeing, we are pretty much slated to be among top 3 within next 2 years. Cool. I think that's pretty much it from my end.
Thank you so much, Kapil. A very data-rich glimpse into the gaming world. I think fantastic presentation. We've also been receiving comments on chat mode as well for the same. Wonderful. So I'm curious about the story behind the brand name, Junglee Games. How did you arrive at naming the business such?
Oh, it's a funny story. So
Sure.
That's our founder's story.
Mm-hmm.
So his mother always used to call him Junglee when he was a kid.
Okay.
And he grew up, and he was thinking about what to name the company, and Junglee became a obvious choice just purely because it's a little fun and kind of also resonates with the gamers in general. We find them, as far as in Indian ecosystem is concerned, we find them Junglees at heart.
Wonderful. Excellent. So, when and how did gaming enter your life? And at what stage did you really start thinking about, building a business focused on gaming?
Yeah, so post my startup in food tech, pretty much I was at crossroads. Like, hey, I moved back to another food tech company, sell them
Mm-hmm.
the product and go there, or I go back to consulting, which is reinsurance, insurance, wealth management, telecom, so on and so forth, or
Mm-hmm.
I start another entrepreneurial business, or is there any other industry which is a sort of a hidden gem in
Mm-hmm.
2015, and if there is any interesting opportunities around that. So that's when um, I met Junglee Games, and there were enough synergies on four areas. One, purely like the kind of people you will work with. You need to find that comfort that, hey, these are the right sort of people whom you would want to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Second, purely on the learning standpoint of view, when you have seen few of the industries and you are aching to do something different, and you want to learn more, and gaming offered that sort of complexity. Everything from tech to data to innovation to creativity, the gaming pretty much keeps you on your toes. So that was obviously one of the huge factor. The third one was, when you started a business, you've also worked for MNCs. You have also worked for small to business, medium business, which are on doing transactional sort of business,
Mm-hmm.
and help them grow as well. It was basically a movement. How can you take something that just found a product market fit and they just started off, and take that story from having one game to multiple games and building a name in the Indian ecosystem, which pretty much what we have been doing from last 5 to 6 years. And so far, I think these were some of the key contributing factors. And when I reflect back, I think it has been a fantastic decision. Uh, and personally, I love the industry.
Right place, right time.
Yeah.
Great. Which is your favorite game?
Well,
And do you actually get time to play games?
yeah. So I generally have like two phones because
Mm-hmm.
there's iOS world and there's Android world, and even Android there are multiple other versions. And as game publisher, you should always know what works for what phone.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I would have at any single point in time 80 to 100 games on my phone, at least one of the phones.
Wow.
That's purely checking out what new games are coming in,
Mm-hmm.
what games are interesting. But there are one or two games you always fall back on. And see, gaming content is very interesting. There's a
Mm-hmm.
fatigue in gaming content. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't keep you around for a while. Like you will see a game taking a fire for 2 3 years, a new game will spawn, and they will start topping the charts. And recent example is Roblox. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. True.
So what I've been trying to do is staying little on top of that cow, like what is working out, what is the next wave looks like. But
Mm-hmm.
the phases what I have gone through in gaming, I pretty much started from a simple game like Tetris to moving on to Contra or Mario, and from there on a Pac-Man to a
Mm-hmm.
Quake game and a Counter-Strike game to likes of PUBG. On the social side, there have been everything from Ludo to Carom to a Rummy to a Teen Patti to a poker, pretty much everything,
Mm-hmm.
depending on where your family and friends are. So have been pretty active on those fronts. Hard to pick a favorite as it keeps on changing and evolving. But
Mm-hmm.
last one has been PUBG.
Okay. Great. Great.
Hence, you see
What?
the screenshot of PUBG there.
True. True. What is the number of employees at Junglee? Like, I mean, the operations are again pan India or again overseas as well?
Yeah, so we have about 300 people right now.
Okay.
We started very small. I think in from 2015 to 20, in 5 years, we went from 30 to 300 people.
Okay.
The operations are majorly centered in India, in Delhi and Bangalore, but we also have folks working out from US, Poland, Hong Kong. And the content which we generate has been also a little diverse in terms of, like, though we are focused on the skill based games, but there is also the other genres which is free to play, and creating games like eatme.io, which is more like a global sort of game. So we do create games for India as well as outside India, and always look for little bit of diversification. Always look out for what's next, what we can do uh, in terms of either diversifying or launching new product lines by ourselves, or thinking of any sort of partnerships which we can have in terms of expanding our content as well as user base as well as revenue streams.
Sure. Thank you. There's a question by Vishnu. He'd like to know that, he's curious to know how visual designers, 3D modelers, concept designers can contribute in Indian gaming companies. Junglee may be hiring, and possibly you could, answer from that aspect as well.
Yeah, Junglee has been hiring. I think we have been a hiring role for a while, and we have been fortunate enough that at such times we have been on the other side of things, that we got an opportunity where we can help people and also leverage the opportunity to boost and create more and more opportunities for more people. Purely from an Indian ecosystem, I think whosoever is looking for answer on the design front, they have to be very picky on the kind of games the studio builds. Like I talked about it, some games are going to be probably graphic rich, some games are going to be more onto 3D sort of experience, some would be on great on animations, some would be purely great on art, but a great game brings it all together. But normally every game does not need a great art, but any studio which has been working on really building games like likes of PUBG, I think that's where everything comes together. And there are studios in India who are actually doing such fantastic work. And we have done some decent work in eatme.io, and you guys should explore that and see how you guys feel about it. But we are always looking for such people as well who can bring. Usually, we'll look for someone who can bring this all together. While we have found that generally people tend to learn on the go, which is fine, but at least even having a forte or experience in at least one area, from there on there is a zeal to learn other areas and bring this all together. I think there is always a role for such people in every studio.
Sure. Thank you. There's one question by Balabhaskar. He would like to know that how we can build gaming ecosystem around esports and compete with developed nations. I think you'll have to break his question into three aspects. So maybe this is the first question which you can take, that how can we build a gaming ecosystem around esports to compete with developed nations?
Yeah, perfect. So I think some work is already being done. So we have already built Indian Esports Federation. That's where we could take them to Asiads and so on and so forth. New gaming esports companies like Nordwin or like Playtica or uh, Gaming Monk, they are trying to create a little bit of those products which facilitate these kind of events. And Nordwin has been pretty much successful. But esports needs to start at the ground level. So a lot of action happens at the college level, at the community level. Once these communities, and they generally have pretty pretty hardcore gamers in these community. Once these communities starts forming those leagues and building those teams, and they start coming upfront about it and start getting themselves involved and start competing in those competitions, and at the same time, obviously, at the end of the day, every business is looking to make money. There is money flowing into that esports ecosystem as well, which gives a lot of opportunities to different companies trying to do this and bring the talent out from India as well. And more that will happen. More and more investment needs to go at the grass level. And I think right now there is no structure. The first thing we need is a structure. Like everybody is aware how IPL happens, but I'm pretty much sure that, except for 5% of the gamers who might or might not know, even within that 5% of gamers, only people who have generally attended one of those tournaments would know overall how the structure of a tournament will be and how they can evolve in games and what is the complexity of the ecosystem. I'll go back to the slide just for reference. So
Sure.
the complexity of the ecosystem is, how do you form the leagues? How do you find a sponsorship for the leagues? How the uh, leagues can facilitate and bring in an inbound interest from teams, which is generally teams are being going to be held by some sort of leaders at community level, and they start competing against each other. If there is a strong inbound interest, there are few companies who are trying to achieve this. But like I said, it's the start is with a federation. Then you put down a structure, and then you start hosting uh, events at a city level. You start hosting events at a state level. You start hosting events at a country level. There are events that are happening, but there are very few. They might be happening once a year and very limited number of games. I know a lot of action is there in PUBG, Dota, Counter Strike, and lately new games would also be going in. But there are a lot of other games like FIFA. I know there is a strong presence in India. People who play that, but not a lot of action when it comes to esports. So just purely structuring around it, and that's what I meant when I said this is the new thing in India. More and more brands see value and ready to sponsor these, and these companies can generate more revenue. They will channelize those investments into building that ecosystem, from teams to leagues to publishers. So, and also second one of the another factor is purely the publisher relationships. So generally, if you'll notice, most of these esports titles are not from India. So when you have to bring a title in on your platform, it takes sort of building some sort of partnerships and doing those discussions, and people being open to having those discussions and actually aligning those. Had we had a powerhouse of publishers within India, that would have been much more easier. So I think if we can start doing a great job in just purely building such games and also publishing them, and they find traction, and rest of the world also try to play on those platforms, even in the esports, that would be a secondary factor that would start influencing. The third would be purely what are the gaming influencers doing about it in India. Like I briefly touched about on YouTube and Twitch, while there are a lot of followers on Instagram and Twitter and all that, as far as gaming influencers are concerned, there are very few, and the scale of or the reach of those influencers is not enough. So how do we build a reach of such people who might be playing or would be highly skilled players and might be competing in these events? How do we give them platform or a time and bring them out, saying, hey, there's another guy who is doing this. For example, I'll give you a very small example. A 16-year-old who has been doing a only simulation based F1 racing for a long time, only simulation based F1 racing in a game. He gets onto a track
Mhm.
and he could compete with a real Formula One driver. So which is amazing, like kind of high hand-eye coordination you can build around this, and that's where there is a lot of openness in actually accepting the fact that there is a little bit of sport here, but it might not be all physical. It could be also mental. It could be the sort of complexity and the real-time actions or strategy that needs a lot of thinking power. Like generally, if you'll notice, like chess is accepted, right? It's accepted uh, as a game where you can even reach out to Olympics, but it's purely a uh, mind game where you try and play around the strategies. So similarly, we have seen a lot of adoption as far as or acceptance as far as esports is concerned across the world, and I think that acceptance needs to happen also more and more in India, but also with a little caution and maturity where, you know, even, you know, traditionally Indian parents or society has been conservative, and, you know, there is a little taboo, like, hey, what are you doing? You're playing games all day, right?
True.
That needs to be lifted, and also look at the games on the purely on the brighter side as well. But if you'll go to a country like China or Korea, there are professional gamers sitting right there. All they do is they sort of put their teenage or even post that in, you know, building or honing their skills in gaming, and from there on they're professional gamers, and that's what built the ecosystem as well. So there are different layers to it. How do you find those influencers who can create more awareness, who are purely gamers themselves, and who gives them that sort of platform and visibility? The gamers themselves come out of the social taboo or someone else looking down upon them and trying to seek this more like a professional career, if not full time, at least part time, and get more and more engaged in these communities. Third, the sort of investments which might be coming into a few of the companies which are trying to do that. And fourth, purely more and more brands seeing value in it. Right now, as I talked about, there's direct fit brand, and there are other brands like which generally we have seen around sports like Red Bull and Coke and so on and so forth. So more and more brands starts investing from a brand visibility standpoint of view, that will start kicking in. And finally, how do you create more and more tournaments at a city, state, nation level, and hold these contests more frequently?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kapil. This also, in a way, answers Aditya's question, Aditya Borgaonkar's question, that, you know, is there any scope for traditional Indian sports to be converted into esport? Yes, but I guess it's like still a nascent stage, so it's going to still take a while. Am I right, Kapil?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any, see, FIFA can be converted like to a esports, like, right? So obviously, you know, it's a traditional sport. You play football. Now you play football on a mobile phone, and you can compete in a esports. Like that's there. There is already adoption to it. So
Right.
that sort of game has already seen uh, some visibility and some traction as far as esports is concerned. Similarly, other games like India being very popular for cricket, yes, there is a possibility that, you know, somebody needs to build those uh, games where you can plug in to a Steam account and you can play in a multiplayer fashion. Though a 11-player game would be a little difficult. You pretty much will do one-on-one, but something can definitely be there, which you can. It just depends on the complexity and the product market fit of that sport. But yes, I think the world is, there will be adoption to it, but as and when we will see the progress of adoption, that's when we need to figure out which is that sport which we need to hit on.
Sure. Thank you. See, there are more questions coming in, but I will request the audience that we'll have to reach out to you all offline because we've already overshot the webinar time, and I believe even Kapil needs to, head to another meeting. So we will conclude the session here, but your questions will be answered offline for sure. We've shared a link in the chat mode. Please reach out to us on our various social channels. I'm available on LinkedIn as well. So we'll touch base and we'll get those queries answered as well. So a round of thanks to our participants now for joining us today, and special thanks to our guest speaker Kapil for his time and the value add takeaways from his journey. We encourage you to connect with us via our social channels to know more about the MIT ID Innovation Program and upcoming online courses and such webcasts. I'd also like to invite you all to our next webinar on Saturday, 18th July. Our guest speaker is Mr. Samir Agarwal, India Head of LinkedIn Learning Solutions, who will be speaking about driving innovations and leading with learning. So please register in case you haven't yet. For those interested in enrolling for the one-year course, we have last few seats left for the second cohort of this prestigious program that will fast-track your career path. So log on to www.mitidinnovation.com to kickstart your innovation journey with a diverse set of co-innovators. Thank you so much once again, Kapil, and a fantastic session. Sorry we had to, kind of spend a few extra minutes, but glad listening to you and wonderful coming to know about the gaming industry and all its opportunities that lay ahead.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining the discussion.
Sure. Thank you. Everyone, stay connected, stay safe, and please keep innovating every day. Thank you.